Hello again. Only a few years ago, people who wished to change sex, that is to say, men who wished to be seen as women and women who wanted the world to regard them as men, were very, very rare. One seldom heard of them except in the News of the World and other salacious Sunday newspapers. Once in a while, men like James Morris, who was castrated in Casablanca in the early 70s and thereafter was known as Jan, became national celebrities, but such things were still extremely rare. There have, of course, always been cases of this kind, going back as far as the days of the Roman Empire. Nero had a male lover called Sporus, whom he arranged to have castrated, and then dressed in female clothes, pretending that the young man was now a woman. Of course, the Roman Empire was at that time a byword for decadence, so that kind of thing was not viewed as all that remarkable. It was another nation, also proverbial for degeneracy, in which mutilations of this kind were pioneered in the 20th century and led ultimately to the situation today, where many young men are castrated and a lot of young women have needless double mastectomies and hysterectomies in order to present themselves to the world as male rather than female. The regime in Germany during the 1920s and early 1930s is commonly known as the Weimar Republic. It was a bit like the swinging 60s in Britain, a time when anything went and the boundaries of good taste, moderation and decency were constantly being pushed back. The film Cabaret was of course set during this period. There was a more permissive attitude towards sex generally than had been the case when the Kaiser ruled Germany, and homosexuality began to be more openly practiced. A German psychiatrist called Magnus Hirschfeld spent a lot of time campaigning to make the law on sexual variation less harsh, so that homosexuals became accepted and sodomy was no longer a criminal act. He set up in Berlin a clinic called the Institute of Sexual Research. Hirschfeld claimed to have discovered no fewer than 64 kinds of gender identity, an idea which has recently become very popular again. It was at Hirschfeld's clinic that a Danish artist called Ina Wagner was castrated and then underwent other operations in 1930 and 1931 with the idea of transforming him into a woman. This was the first such operation in the 20th century, and it provided the pattern for such surgery today. This kind of thing was only possible in Germany during the Weimar years, and after 1933 it came to an abrupt end there. However, after the end of the Second World War, experimental surgery was carried out on other men, following Hirschfeld's lead. Today, these procedures are commonplace, and nobody bats an eyelid to hear that some man has been castrated or a woman mutilated by having her breast amputated. Amusing terms have been coined for this sort of thing. For example, double mastectomies are known as top surgery. All the modern ideas about gender and sexuality being a spectrum also come from the work of Magnus Hirschfeld, based upon his 64 supposed variety of gender and sexuality. Of course, for thousands of years, humanity managed to get by very well without this kind of thing, and until liberals and intellectuals in the Weimar Republic began castrating people, it never occurred to anybody that this might be a wholesome or sensible thing to do. After all, Ina Wagner died of complications following the surgery to which he was subjected, and even today such operations are still very much experimental, with no real data on long-term consequences. It is fair to say, though, that having different genders from the one with which you were born and seeking surgery to alter your body accordingly is now something of a fad, especially among young people. There are those who think that it would have been a much better thing for all concerned had Magnus Hirschfeld not felt the need to fool around in this way, though, because it is far from certain that people are in fact happier and live more fulfilling lives following this extreme form of body modification. The jury is still out on the wisdom of using surgery to correct what is essentially a psychiatric condition. Some have compared these operations to lobotomies, which used to be so popular at one time for dealing with psychiatric disturbance.